Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another live stream. I am overjoyed to say in the virtual studio I have Stephanie Mitchell-Hughes of Resilience 2.0. This is a lady herself who can talk of resilience from a first person's perspective. She's been through what she refers to as hard places, has got the cuts, the bruises, and the marks to prove it, and has come out the other side. However, today's discussion is really featuring the situation we now find ourselves in. It is very easy right now to slip into a melodious pattern of low self-esteem, low thought process, and a lack of hope. But the problem is to function, to achieve, to move forward, we have to find a way to hope. Right. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you, Gareth. Yes. Yeah, so, I live in the United States and I know the rest of the world is watching us. And you have people there's a lot of malaise in different communities. There is fear, in outright fear in communities. There is and a lot of people are frightened for different reasons. I mean, you've got neo-Nazis marching in my town where I live and what have you. And it can seem as if the world is careening out of control because we're in this huge sea change, and the changes that seem to be imminent are not necessarily positive ones and are not viewed positively.
The most obvious is the threat of fairly indiscriminate mass deportation, and that's the fact that the only way to affect such a monumental change in a society that was defined by the foreigner anyway. All of America are immigrants. I mean, really, they should be looking at themselves and saying, we're the immigrants, we should give it back to the indigenous. But anyway, moving past that. So the fact is that there's potentially going to be a huge mobilization of the army to make this, to making almost de facto martial law, the rise of potentially fascism and protectionism, the supposed hikes on foreign import tariffs, which really hurt the American economy if the tariffs are on essential goods, because it's the Americans that will pay for this, not the foreign companies, but the Americans. With all this happening, it would be so easy to duck under the duvet again and hide from the world, hoping it will all over. And I suppose in a way, my message in all this is you have to take a long-term view. That at some point, logic, empathy, and compassion will have to win through at some point. My only worry is how long will it take for them to surface through this miasmic maze?
Well, Gareth, it's just like with anything else, time will tell. Lately, because of course I'm here and I've been listening to pundits and people talk about the election and the possible outcome in terms of cabinet appointments and policies and deportation and all of those things. And what it did was it started me thinking about just my own difficult patch, my own difficult spaces that I've encountered. I talked about them a lot in my TEDx Columbus talk all those years ago. The thing I had to learn, and it took me a long time. It took me a long time to make that transition out of the really hard space that I was in, because I kept thinking that I could go in this direction or that direction, or if I just move this thing, or if I could change this thing. I kept trying to move in the direction that I felt I needed to go, when life was telling me that I was going to have to do all of this along a completely different path. And so it required introspection. It required stopping and taking the measure of things and listening, and then figuring out my next direction and my next steps.
I
And
get that. I
I
get that.
emerged
It's what
out
you're
of.
talking, but all of this you have control of.
No, not necessarily. No, I don't. No, I don't. Because really, that is ultimately the point of the hard place. You don't really have control. You
So
think
what you're advocating is
you have control.
surrendering. You're surrendering to it.
So what I had to do was surrender to the fact that I wasn't necessarily going to be able to go in the direction that I wanted to go, that I was choosing to move in. I had to yield. I had to be willing to sort of step back and yield and think, okay, and pay attention to what life at that time was asking of me and telling me that I had to do. Because, see, this is the thing. When you're in a really hard space, like when I've been in hard spaces since 2006. My approach, though, is different. And my expectation is different, because I then will step back and not assume that I know how this all should unfold and could somehow control all of the pieces on the board. As a lawyer, everything is chess, everything is a Rubik's Cube, but that's not realistic life. And so I had to be willing to look at other things, other people, and other possibilities. But more importantly, I had to realize and recognize that all of the healing that I needed to do, I had to do in the space that I occupied. Right down, I called it a valley, right down in the muck and mire of the valley. Because once that healing takes place, once you get on the other side of a hard place, then you cannot and should not drag whatever you were carrying in that hard place outside of it. Because ultimately, I understood that whatever I was carrying at that time, I had to let go of it, because I wasn't going to be able to carry toxicity and dysfunction and, out of control depression and all of that stuff. I couldn't carry that where I was going. My point is, whether it be a political election, whether it be, because one of the other things that we've been having here in the United States it's just been a rash of mass layoffs. And there's a lot of speculation when you read comments of the people who have been laid off. There's a lot of speculation as to the reason for that. And then conversely, there are layoffs, but then I read about lawyers who are very fortunate in my profession who are receiving these huge year-end bonuses. I mean, there are large white shoe law firms that are competing for who can give out the largest bonus. And the question that I have been left with was, okay, so you're giving people these bonuses now, but are you going to lay them off come January and tell them that bonus was really your severance? Time will tell. And I guess the other thing is that I refuse to allow who I am as a person and the way that I live my life to be totally controlled by who's in the White House, who's in any house, who's in the government, what party is in control, all of that kind of stuff, because those are things that are outside of my control. You talk about definitely outside of your control. But the people who are going to be affected by those layoffs, those hard places, the people who are going to be affected by prices, if they indeed, if tariffs are imposed and prices are increased, that's a hard place. And people will have to look at how they do even the most basic things: feed their families, repair their cars, buy food for their children, send their children to school. Those basic kinds of things. People are going to have to figure out how this is going to work. And so I want to say to people, because I've been just thinking about this a lot,
Right.
is if you're in a hard place, even if it's as a country, as a race of people, as a community of people, of immigrants, what have you, as a person who has lost their job, this too shall pass. Somehow, some way will come out of it.
I mean, I get that, but what I'm worried about is what often happens is that people draw the horns in. There's mass redundancies. Suddenly, you've got a massive increase in the number of people looking for jobs. People become more and more picky about the people to fill any new jobs that come on. And then the attention comes to, well, it's the immigrants taking away my job.
Right. But see, okay, so what has to happen? People use immigrants. However, I'm not really sure how in the United States you define immigrants. I don't want to get into that conversation, but immigrants, it's been my experience and observation that they do the jobs that most people, that American people who have lived in this country, whether it's their entire life or, they've become completely Americanized, that immigrants do the jobs that other people don't want to do. But the thing that I think we have to remember is, don't lose your ability to see another's humanity. At the end of the day, we are human beings, that we are living here on this earth together. Each of us has something to contribute. Our worth and value, somebody may decide to put a specific worth and value, but that price does not determine my worth and value as a human being. There's one of me. Just like there's one of you. And we are different enough. We're the same in many ways, but we are different enough to have our own unique contribution to bring. But we have to stop vilifying and villainizing groups of people who are different. Stop that. That's not helpful. Because what is it? There's the quote by Martin Luther King, where it's like, we'll learn to live together, I'm paraphrasing, as men, or die as fools. And we keep repeating the same history over and over and over again. And it's like,
remember what they say, the definition of madness is constantly repeating the same thing and expecting
a different result. It's like you don't learn the lesson. And when you don't learn the lesson, then you'll do what I did for all those years, because I wouldn't stop, pay attention, learn the lesson, surrender to what the lesson was trying to teach me. So what did I do? I kept, like the Israelites in the Old Testament, marching around in the same circle. And it's like, okay, well, you can decide If you're going to spend 40 years out in the wilderness, marching around in the same circle, fighting with people, vilifying people, demonizing them, all of that other kind of stuff, without looking at what your own biases are, without holding yourself accountable. Right. Because at the end of the day, we keep repeating these things. Internment camps, World War II, after Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were rounded up. It didn't matter whether they had been here for a generation or not. Rounded up and sent to internment camps.
Germans too. There were massive German internment camps, all the rest of it.
See, and it's just, we're just going to round all these people, vilifying people. At the end of the day, we in this country, we in this world will never heal what we refuse to acknowledge. And part of that healing means hard, because that's hard. That's hard work.
So this is what you're saying is that's the hard places. Stephanie, would you just round this up by summarizing for me?
We all are going to have a hard place, whether it is as a country, whether it is just as your own individual person, or whether or not it is your family. People are dying unexpectedly, and families are left to grieve and pick up the pieces and keep going. Loss upon loss, regardless of what it is. We can survive hard places. We can. We've got to be willing to do the work so that we can heal and then move forward.
But what I've got to say, just to finish this off, it's all very well surviving hard places, but we need to learn the lessons that got us there.
Exactly.
So we don't keep repeating it. I'm an old Jew. And by the way, for those of you who suddenly get their hackles raised, that's not the same thing as an Israeli. That they are quite different. Israel's a country. I'm a Jew. There's no point in constantly repeating the same lesson again and again. There's a statement made a long time ago by another old Jew that should be passed down from children to children. And I think Black people should pass it down from child to child as well, which is the single phrase, never again.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep our eyes open. There are people now saying that the Holocaust never happened. There are people now that say that Black people went willingly. All of it is rubbish. We need to remember what happened. We need to be aware of our real history and learn from it. Never again. And to have hope, because as you say, this too shall pass. Thank you once again, Stephanie.
Thank you, Gareth.
These conversations, I hope you find them as useful as I do. And will stay with us, hopefully, for more next week. Until then, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Just keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars, but do look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.
Bye.